So this is lecture 2 for unit 7. Remember the first unit lecture we did for this was actually before we started reviewing for the AP exam, so you might need to go back and review that. So today our aim is, why would a business locate close to a market? And we're really going to be looking at which type of businesses would need to locate their factories close to a market. A market is, again, just like an area where you're going to sell your product. And really how we're going to do this is we're going to distinguish between bulk gaining and bulk reducing industries. Now, before we get started, we have to review or do now the difference between site and situation. So site are conditions, what's it like there, and we're going to be looking at the unique characteristics of a particular location. But again, we're in the economic geography section, so we're going to be looking more along the lines of what kind of raw materials are here, what kind of labor do I have nearby to do my work, and then for situation, connections, how does it relate to other locations? I'm really going to be looking at transportation costs. Okay, that's the big key. Another vocab term to know is inputs. Inputs are just the materials needed for your production. So it could be a raw material, or it could be like your car parts, your component parts that I'm going to use to build a bike or build a car or whatever I'm building. So this part looks confusing, but we're going to break it down. So basically, when you're figuring out where to locate your factory, the thing you really need to focus on is transportation. The farther something needs to be transported, the higher the cost. This makes sense, correct? It's going to be more expensive for me to get a flight from New York to California than it is for me to get a flight from like New York to Boston, because I'm traveling farther. So I need to really think about transportation costs and how to minimize my transportation costs. So I'm either going to locate in two locations, really. I'm going to locate either close to my inputs, close to my materials, or close to my markets, close to my customers. And so how I figure out where I want to go then is I'm going to look at, again, the cost of transportation. So if the cost of bringing the raw materials to the factory, if that is higher than the cost of bringing the finished goods to the people, then I want to put my factory next to my inputs, next to my raw materials, okay? And then if the cost of transporting the finished goods, the finished product, is higher than actually moving all of my raw materials, I want to then move my factory as close to the customer or the market as possible, because I want to minimize moving heavy objects, because heavy objects are going to be more expensive to move than light objects. Think about when you are, you ever have to like ship a package, right? Something that is really light, like some papers or something, is going to be a lot less expensive to ship than like a TV. So here's a nice little chart to kind of help you out. And really we get our vocab terms: bulk reducing and bulk gaining. Get a little laser pointer. Bulk gaining and bulk reducing. All right, so my inputs, my materials, if they are heavy, I want to minimize the distance I have to bring them to my factory. So I'm going to put my factory close to my heavy materials. All right, and this is called bulk reducing because think about it. You're going to be losing weight as you make the product. The product loses weight. So for example, think about like paper. Paper is a really great example of a bulk reducing product because paper starts out as a giant tree. Trees are heavy. I don't want to move trees all the ways to a factory next to New York City because that's going to be really, 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 really expensive. So I'm going to put my factory right next to the trees, next to my lumber yard, because then I don't have to move the trees very much at all. And then as I make the paper, obviously the weight is reduced, bulk reducing, all right, because the individual pieces of paper, they weigh a lot less than the giant tree. So then that's when I'm going to decide to move the long distance to New York City to my market or wherever. All right, the opposite then, bulk gaining. So I'm going to think here, all right, the individual parts themselves don't weigh very much, but whatever my finished product is like super, super heavy. So I don't want to move that finished product very much at all. All right, so as a result, I'm going to put my factory as close to the market as possible so I don't have to move my products very far once they're actually made, and I'll pay then to ship my various inputs, my materials to the factory. So again, I'm trying to minimize my costs by reducing the amount of money I spend on transportation, and I'm really looking then to make sure I'm not moving heavy stuff a long distance. So, what are some examples of bulk gaining industries? Industries that would locate close to the market, going back to our aim. So, again, bulk gaining industries, those whose finished products are heavier than the inputs. Weight is being added, it is gaining bulk. So, as a result, again, my cost of shipping the outputs to the market, the final product, is much more expensive than the cost of shipping the inputs to the factory. So, two big examples here: cars. Car components. Cars are very heavy when they are finally finished, so it makes more sense that you actually want the car factories, the car manufacturing plants, to be closer to the people, all right, that you're going to sell them to. Another example, beverages, all right? And beverages, maybe you don't think so right away, but you have to kind of think beverages really do gain weight because when they start, you have maybe a bottle, you have your various like additives, like your sugar and your flavoring, whatever. The most expensive part is the water of any drink, any beverage is the water, okay? And so because water is available everywhere, you can then, and I mean, I don't mean obviously not everywhere, but you know what I mean. Beverage producers then can ship the raw ingredients, the bottles, the syrups, again, whatever their flavoring is, to the factories close to the population centers. And then in those factories, then they can just add the water and then be able to ship it to the individual stores, supermarkets, etc. So as a result, beverages of any kind are really going to be bulk gaining. Another example for beverages, breweries, so where people make beer. You can see here, I know my little like thing is kind of in the way. We have basically two major breweries in the US, and you can kind of see where they're locating is always going to be near at least somewhat of a urban area. All right, you definitely see a lot more on the East Coast, which makes sense because there's more people on the East Coast. You see a lot less up here, the Plains area in general, because again, there's not that many people in the Plains, so it's actually not that big of a market. All right, and then this is kind of like a weird one. So bulk gaining. Bulk gaining can also refer to an industry if your final products are harder to ship than your inputs. So when you're shipping potatoes themselves, they're, I mean, they're heavier than potato chips, but you don't really care if the potato gets damaged on its way to the processing plant. However, with my final product, my little potato chip, those I don't want them to get damaged. I don't want people to like smash my bag of potato chips before I get to the store. So they're a little more fragile to ship. So they're actually going to be considered bulk gaining. Or think about like bread. You don't want bread to get like smushed on the way to the store. Another type of industry that will locate close to a market is a single market industry. And so what this means is I don't have a lot of customers if I'm a single market industry. So I'm going to locate next to my customers no matter what, so that I can reduce shipping costs. And this will allow for what is called just in time delivery, meaning my big customer, I don't have many customers at all, right? They call me up and they say, okay, I really need a big shipment right now. And because I have my factory right next to them, I'm able to just bring it over in no time. And they like that because that means that they don't have to have, my customer doesn't have to have a big warehouse to store all of my products. They can just call me and I'll bring it over. So you tend to see a lot of these industries, they agglomerate near their big customer. And so let me give you an example because it's kind of confusing when I'm talking about it in abstract terms. So an example of this would be car components. So if I am building then I manufacture the actual seat belts. right? I don't manufacture the cars, but I manufacture seatbelts, and then car companies like Ford and Chevy and Toyota, they buy my seatbelts. Well, I mean, who else am I selling seatbelts to really besides car companies? All right, so as a result, I'm going to put my seatbelt factory next to a larger car assembly plant so that when they need it, they need seatbelts, they call me up, I'm right there. I'm not going to have to ship my products a long distance, and I'm able to meet their demand pretty much right away. And so we can kind of see this with the auto parts plants. So if I'm looking here, they're kind of all agglomerated in this one area. And we've talked about before, kind of Detroit was like the headquarters of auto industry for a long time in the US. There's a lot of auto plants that are there in this area. And you can see then all of the auto parts plants, like the various car components, are also gathering near there because they have really a single industry they're selling to, a single customer, which is the larger car plants. All right. And again, agglomeration means I'm clustering in one area. And kind of as like a side note, another reason why Detroit was kind of chosen as the place to put all of the car manufacturing plants initially in the early 1900s when cars were really taking off in the US, think like Model T, Ford, is the mean population, mean center of the population, meaning, again, that would be wherever this is today, 2010, right? Remember, it's the same amount of people live here as live over here. Same amount of people live here as over here. So it's not the dead center of the country. All right. In 1910, it was right around here. So very close to where Detroit is. So it made more sense then to have your car plants here because I'm going to have to ship over here and over here, but I'm going to ship here more often. So I'm going to want to put my car plant closer because they're heavy. They're bulk gaining. Another single market industry are zippers. So if you think about it, who is buying zippers other than the garment industry? All right. So basically, you're going to have a zipper plant then next to wherever you have a clothing plant because why would you have zippers being made thousands and thousands of miles away from where clothes are made? It doesn't make any sense. So the zipper industry, since it's only really selling to the clothing industry, puts its plant near its customer, the clothing industry. And then lastly, another thing here for locating close to a market, perishable products, which means they need to be fresh to maintain their value. And I'm not talking about like milk here or agriculture, all right, because that would be more von Thunen. I'm talking about things like a newspaper where they're printed daily, so they're time sensitive, and I am not going to buy a newspaper that's a day old, right? I need to have it right there. And so because they have to literally print these in the middle of the night, bring them to everyone's house at like 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, they need to be near their customers. Now, so that was our bulk gaining are companies that are going to be near customers, but we also want to look at bulk reducing. So bulk reducing, again, I'm going to lose weight as my product is being made. So it's going to be a lot more expensive than to move my inputs to the factory than it is to move my output, my final product. So therefore, I'm going to locate near my raw materials, my inputs. So think about really heavy things here like metals, minerals, copper, steel, lumber are your examples here. And if we look at steel mills over time, steel mills needed to be near two heavy products, all right, iron ore and coal. And as a result, they are going to then locate somewhere near these areas. And so really the big thing you need though is coal to make the steel. And so that's why you started to see a lot of the historical steel industries kind of settling near them, especially this is going to be Pittsburgh, the Steelers, right? And then as they find new deposits of coal or ore, they might move them later on, but really that's going to be the thing is that's really, really expensive to move. I'm not going to move my coal, my iron ore super large distances, so I'm going to make sure I put my factories near them. It's a bulk reducing industry. Other important key terms, a footloose industry. A footloose industry means its product is so lightweight and it's very valuable that location's not much of an issue. So kind of the quintessential example here is a computer chip because a computer chip is so light, but it's also valuable. It has a lot of information in it. It was expensive to make compared to other products, but because it's so light to ship, I can put it wherever I want. All right, so I'm not as bogged down into this bulk gaining, bulk producing thing. Another key term, technopole. Technopole is an area with lots of high-tech businesses, an agglomeration of them. The most famous one would be the Silicon Valley in California, your tech startups. So that's kind of what you think of. And then deglomeration is if there's overcrowding, there's maybe too many types of this one industry in one place. They've agglomerated too much. It's going to be deglomeration. They're going to unclump. All right, so we're going to see them start to actually spread out. Now, one last thing I want to look at is called Weber's lowest cost theory. So kind of think about this like the industrial version of von Thunen. So von Thunen's telling me where to put my different types of farms. Weber's telling me where to put my different types of factories, businesses. So again, transportation, what we just talked about, is the most important, right? So I'm looking at bulk gaining, bulk reducing, distance, and weight are the most important factors. But the other things we haven't talked about yet, labor and agglomeration, we briefly touched, but labor is going to be really important as well. So high labor costs reduce my profits, right? So it might be worth it to locate farther from my inputs or my market if I can make cheap labor, if I can find cheap labor and I can save enough on cheap labor to make up for the added transportation costs. And lastly, agglomeration. Similar businesses cluster in the same area and they can kind of support each other, which reduce costs. All right, so that's another third thing. So when I'm thinking about how I need to ship my product, I need to think about not just the distance, but the method, the way I'm going to do it. So there's four types, right? Four modes really. Trucks are the best for short distance delivery, where you need to unload something really quickly. All right, and so these are going to be the best for same day deliveries, which is again why when you finally get your UPS package you've been tracking, right? It's coming in a truck. Trains are the best for multi-day. If I'm going across a wide expanse like the east to the west coast, they are expensive to load and unload, but they don't need to stop during their journey and they're very efficient. All right, so they're slower than the trucks maybe, but they are more cost efficient to load up a bunch at once. Lastly, ships. Again, this is if you have long distances, especially international, across continents, that are not time sensitive. It takes a lot longer than land transportation, but they can carry vast amount of goods in one single load. So again, they're very cost efficient, but it does take a lot longer. If you have something you need to ship, long distances across the world, across oceans very quickly, then you would need to do air, but air is the most expensive. So it's only really going to be used for high value, low bulk, time sensitive goods, like sending like diamonds or something like that. If I'm sending like a car, I'm going to send it on the boat. Okay? So there you go. Now, usually you're going to use multiple points. Like the boat is not going to like come up to your apartment, and be like, here's that thing you ordered online that we made in China. Like we're going to just bring this boat directly to your house. That's not happening. All right. So what we use then is multiple transportation points, and where they kind of all meet up is what we call the break of bulk point. All right. This is where I'm going to have my rapid transfer. So a good example of this is Newark, New Jersey, right? They have the ocean, they have the port, they have the railroads, the Amtrak, they have I-95, they have Newark Airport. It's all kind of right next to each other. So if now I have my product coming from China, I'm going to put it on the train. The train's going to ship it all across the US, maybe over into places like, I don't know, LA, Colorado, wherever it's going. However, maybe some people who ordered that product are in the US. They're on the East Coast. They are right in New York City. So I'm going to just put it on a truck and deliver it to them then. All right. And we've been talking all about situation, transportation. We do have site as well. This is one of Weber's other methods of looking at where to put your factory, your industry. So labor, guys, is the most important site factor. All right. In the US, labor accounts for 11% of costs. And really, the labor only comes into play if it is a labor-intensive industry. And labor-intensive industry means a lot of your percentage of your cost is made up in labor. All right, so I'm not looking at pure dollars I'm spending on my workforce, I'm looking at the percentage of my total costs. All right, so if this industry is very labor intensive, which is generally a low skill industry, we call it, that means that I want to actually minimize my labor costs, maybe even more than my transportation costs. Because again, my goal as a company is to make money. So I might then move my plants to an area that pays people less, even though I'm going to increase my transportation costs. So, like the textile industry is a great example of this. All right, textile industry, maybe I'm going to move my clothing plant from the US, where I have to pay people a lot more, to India, where I can pay them a lot less per hour because textiles are labor intensive. The next site factor to consider is land price. All right, think about it. Maybe it makes sense to have a bulk gaming industry near your market, but do I want to put it directly in New York City? No, because the land cost is much too expensive. So I might put it in a nearby suburb or a nearby rural area. Another reason why you want to do this, besides the cheap land, is that it's going to be close to highways. I don't want to spend a lot of my time in traffic. And if I'm in the actual city, it might be a lot more traffic. Another thing is too, it's a lot more efficient to have a one-story factory because I don't have to then worry about moving products up and down floors. I can just kind of have a one long assembly line all the ways through. But that means I need more land. So again, I want to consider land costs as well. And I also might want to consider things like nearby amenities, the climate. Is there a low cost energy source? For example, aluminum needs a lot of electricity to be produced, so they might locate near a dam where there's cheap hydroelectric power. So I'm going to consider all of those things as well. And I'm also going to consider capital as my third site factor. Where can I get the money? So I need to find areas where banks are willing to lend money, where the governments are kind of encouraging development. I can maybe find an incentive, a government tax incentive to move here. So, for example, one of the reasons why Silicon Valley is this tech industry hub is that back in the day, a lot of banks are really weary of loaning to these businesses for developing apps and whatnot because it never happened before. But the Silicon Valley area banks were among the first to loan money to new software firms, and so that then became kind of the hub. So this is again very important in distributing industries in the less developed countries. Where can businesses actually get through government red tape, but also find the capital nearby to build their industries? Okay, and we will stop there for today. I know it was a longer lecture. So review this, review maybe the first lecture from before we did AP reviewing to make sure you're all caught up. Have a great day.